I'm Dylan Ratigan. I've interviewed nearly every CEO and most world leaders during the past 25 years. And now on Bootstrapping, I'm turning my attention to the new CEOs and the irrepressible entrepreneurs leading the next generation of innovation in the world. Welcome back to tastylive. I'm Dylan Ratigan. Time for another episode of Bootstrapping. My guest today, Joe Briccato, author, business coach, contributing editor at Forbes, and a man with lists of how to be better at communicating, at connecting, at selling, all of these things. Joe, a pleasure. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
And just to establish your standing to offer the list we're going to get into, you've got a long history working with Walgreens, CNA Insurance, Fifth Third Bank, Citibank, Live Nation, Virgin, with great success. So you're not just a man with lists, you're a man with lists that have been successfully adapted and deployed, which gives you a bit more standing than just a man with a list.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's interesting when you're in business, and in my case, I do a lot of business development for my law firm and other businesses that I'm involved with, and you meet a lot of people and you start noticing patterns around communication, about assessing information and how to put it all together to achieve your goals. And that's really big part of my message.
Well, the latest book is called Hit It Off, the 21 Rules to Play By to Develop Unique Relationships in Both Life and Business, which again goes to, your observations in successful communicators. I don't know that I'm necessarily going to go through all 21, although I do want to pick a number of them out. But I want to sort of really start with what you identify, and I agree with you, as the essential component, which is that the driver of both life experience and commercial experience, business experience. And I think Tasty Trade is a great example of that, because I believe Tom Sosnoff, I've witnessed him in person, is an extraordinary practitioner of this, which is emotional connection between two individuals or between an individual with a product and other people. So much of the world is viewed as transactional. If the electoral system, if you vote for me, I'll give you this. If you buy this, I'll give you this. If you do this, I'll post your thing on Facebook, or whatever it is. An emotional connection is not transactional. Emotional connection is something that's felt. It's like transformational experience where I feel a trust and I feel a confidence in the connection that may or may not be related to a transaction. Explain to me sort of not that it requires it, honestly, but just for the purposes of beginning this discussion, for the purposes of your book, Hit It Off, what is it that amplified to you the primacy, the singular value of emotional connection above other sort of more transactional types of relationship?
Great question. I've always been someone to focus on the interpersonal dynamic from childhood through my young adulthood, and now having practiced law for a little over 31 years. And what I found was, you mentioned the word trust. This is something that is embodied in every personal relationship and every business relationship. So the point of the book is really to hit it off with someone, make that solid first impression, and then develop that into a long-term emotional connection, building what I refer to as a unique relationship, one that is difficult, if not impossible, to replace. And I feel if we're able to develop that sort of bond with people, we're going to exponentially maximize the likelihood of achieving all of our goals in that relationship. And the importance of hitting it off with someone is can't be overstated. And there was a 1992 study, a couple of Harvard researchers basically found that we tend to make snap judgments of people in the first 2 seconds. And we tend not to really change that initial perception even after having more information. So you could be in a personal setting, you could be in a business setting. So the first 2 seconds or so is absolutely critical. And so the book is intended to help people really understand some common sense things. I call them rules. There are 21 of them. And I just happen to have, believe it or not, a copy of the book right here. Hit it off.
Shocking. This is shocking,
isn't it? Yeah, just keep carrying one around with me everywhere I go.
But so here's where my skepticism comes in. I mean, because again, I think that intuitively I agree with this. I think I would argue that much of my own success as an adult is a pure function of my ability to hit it off. And when I don't hit it off, nothing happens. When I do hit it off, things happen. I mean, I think that would be true for most people, actually. Here's where I would have, but I've always viewed whether I hit it off or not as a matter of chemistry, as a matter of the abstract. With some people I hit it off, and there's trust, and there's humor, and there's things there's patience to listen and hear what indulge whatever your idea might be. And with other people, there's not a hitting it of it off, whatever that means, and there's a skepticism and a dismissal and these types of things. So basically, sort of one is like an openness to accept your flaws and listen to your ideas, and another one is a dismissiveness that actually might result in me dismissing good ideas. By the way, it's not always effective, but that hitting it off as a binary, I think, is a very interesting axis for decision making, and I think it makes sense that you wrote the book, and I think it merits attention, and I'm glad we're having you on Bootstrapping to talk about it. But here's where my skepticism lies. Your suggestion is that, and again, I know you call them rules, which you probably had a little bit of a debate internally. Do I call these rules or like observations? Rule may be a little bit of a mischaracterization, but principles we'll call it, but are rules. Do you really believe that someone with whom I have no chemistry, where I may have a natural either indifference or even a mild or a significant negative bias, but I have an interest in doing business with them? They are the CEO of the bank or the CEO of the vendor, whatever it is. They have some custody of some material enterprise that I want to do business with. That if I follow these rules, that I will improve the possibility of the emotional connection, the hitting of it off, and as a result, successful commerce. In essence, can I fake it using these rules?
I don't believe in faking it. And it's interesting you mentioned the characterization of the word rules. I did think about it before I labeled them as such. And I think it's a perfect phrase because we have rules for everything. We have rules for sporting events. We have rules of the road. We have rules of a courtroom. We have rules when we sit down at a table. Basic rules. You're not going to start eating before everybody has their food on the table.
Don't put your elbows. Don't pick up the fork. Wait
exactly. So it's a mindset that we have. We like to follow rules. And we understand that if rules that are important are not followed, it results in chaos. And frankly, in the book, I have in every rule, I have a couple of other sections, one of which is called train wrecks. And this is when the rules really aren't followed and things come off the tracks. I do believe that anyone can adapt to these rules, and particularly because in any setting,
But do you think if I adapt to these rules, and we're going to get into the rules, we're going to do this, but do you think if I adapt to these rules, that the probability that I quote unquote hit it off and establish emotional connection and trust is higher? Even if my chemistry with the person is not necessarily predisposed to match.
It is exponentially higher. The rules are really intended to help you match chemistries and develop rapport, which is actually one of the rules. But the bottom line is, and here's where the heart and soul of the book is. A couple of things, actually. One, it's not just me saying, here are our rules. Of course, when I sat down to write this, I thought of the last 30 plus years of my life, and even going back even into my childhood, as to what are the patterns that I've noticed. And I wrote down intuitive things that I practice every day. They're very common sense. We all kind of know them. However, here's the important part. I did a lot of research, a lot of scientific research around psychological, sociological, business studies, expert commentary around these rules. And I believe that a lot of times when we don't necessarily follow these rules, it's because we really haven't been exposed to the science behind the efficacy of the common sense, of the intuitive. So what I've done in the book is I've kind of synthesized a lot of the science very easily for people to digest. And I've married the science with the intuitive. And that's where I really believe mastery is. And that's what I think people can really learn from the book.
So you've reduced it to what you call 21 rules, which again, I'll call the scientific articulation of intuitive chemistry or intuitive trust or intuitive rapport.
That's a great way of putting it. Yes.
You should have hired me as a publicist. I could have helped you.
You're hired now.
Oh, beautiful. So before I get into the weeds here, are the rules in priority of importance? Was rule 1 more important than rule number 21, or is it more or less a variable list that depends, that's situation specific?
There is no order of importance. It's kind of like, you're a golfer, you have to remember everything kind of to have a nice
keep your head down, put your left square your feet. Like, in other words, keeping your head down is not more important than your feet, than your grip.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's how I would think about these. And the very first rule is really about eye contact and conveying emotion through eye contact. I put that one first because there is a lot of science about that. But the point is, talk about when you first meet someone. Typically, the first thing we do is look into someone's eyes. And we've all heard sayings about eyes are the window to the soul and all this other stuff. There's science around how emotion can be very easily conveyed. You can by the way you pay attention to someone and how you look at them, not looking at them too much. When you first walk up to that individual, that's the first impression they're going to have is, how are you looking at them? And why are you looking at them that way? And understanding that you're conveying, science shows you're conveying emotion through that. It gives you a different way of thinking about it. And one of the umbrellas of the book is really changing the way we think about relationships, really by applying critical thinking and mindfulness to the interpersonal dynamic. So for example, when you meet someone, and the first thing, let's say you do is you look into their eyes, maybe extend your hand to shake their hand. You're thinking about this now a little bit more carefully. You're not just walking up to somebody and say, oh, I'm looking at them. You're remembering the science and you're using that opportunity very strategically. Maybe it's empathy that you want to convey. The way you use your eyes in that regard, when you feel that, you're conveying that. And that's going to have a real significant impact on developing that great first impression, but it sets the stage for developing a long-term emotional bond.
Your father would tell you firm handshake and look him in the eyes. Or your mother.
I'm looking at the camera now.
And you're saying there's a scientific...
your hand right now remotely, but in person it works a lot better.
But your point is, it's not just parental advice or mentoral advice. There's science behind the value, the significant value of a firm handshake and look them in the eyes.
Absolutely. And like I said, with respect to eyes, and frankly, before doing the research, I never really even thought about the concept of using that really strategically and authentically. Used the word fake earlier. Like I said, I don't believe in fake. It's got to be authentic. And really thinking about that, being mindful, being in the moment, and being intensely aware of that interpersonal dynamic and the efficacy of using that to your advantage.
So that one, no one's going to disagree with you, but with all due respect, I don't think it warrants a book. We know, okay? We heard it.
Well, it's like I said, a lot of these are common sense, but as I said before doing the research, I didn't even think of that. Every time I do now look into someone's eyes, and that's just one of the 21 rules, by the way, they have to
I know.
together in context, and that's when they work really well.
And I'm just breaking your balls a little bit because it's my
I love it. Bring it on.
So now let's get into the weeds a little bit with number 2, prepare to achieve goals efficiently in reverse. What does that mean in reverse?
Well, again, great topic for a book in and of itself, but basically science shows that when we think about the end vision of the relationship, whatever our goal for the relationship is first, and then work methodically backwards to the present moment, that works a lot better than starting in the present moment and just fumbling our way through towards some goal that we have in our mind that we haven't really thought out. And the science uses a phrase called future retrospection. And that's really what I've described, starting with your long-term real vision for your goal. A lot of times we enter relationships, we don't really understand what the goal is. We kind of take it for granted. We're going to maybe do business with someone. And, oh yeah, we'd like to get some business, but I use this a lot in a lot of the my breakthrough through peak performance coaching, where basically we take a look at your business plan and we say, okay, what is your vision? We spend a lot of time on articulating a very detailed vision, long-term vision, and then we work methodically back from that, long-term objectives, short-term goals, and then
I want to have 1 million subscribers. How do I get to 1 million subscribers? I want to have whatever it is, XYZ in sales or whatever it is. I want to have this and start at the end.
Start at the end and be methodical about it up to the moment you were in today. And the reason for this is scientifically is because there is so much inefficiency. That's why I say plan goals in reverse efficiently. Because if we start today and start going down the wrong rabbit holes, you're spending scarce resources, whether your time, your money, etc. There's opportunity cost. So it really helps you plan out your rabbit holes based on your short-term goals, long-term objectives, and your ultimate vision. So science shows that that's a much more efficient way of going about achieving your goals.
Obviously, I'm not going to go through all 21 things because otherwise, why would they buy? If we do that, they won't even buy the book. So forgive me. I'm going to skip around a little bit, but I like that. I like that number 2 there. Prepare to achieve goals in reverse. I'm going to skip now to what, at least on my list, is rule number 8, which is use humor to convey a similar worldview. And certainly from a social perspective, making friends, being at a dinner party, cocktail party, meeting your in-laws, whatever it is, that sort of thing obviously is very good at maybe the most effective at creating trust, but it's also potentially the most risky. Because I may make a joke about, the tableware or about the traffic or about something related to politics or religion or taxes, which you're not supposed to do, and it could backfire. So I'm interested in sort of your perspective on how you balance the clear value of using humor to create a deeper sense of emotional connection and trust without taking unnecessary risk that you're suddenly making fun of Joe Biden or Donald Trump or
Right.
Texas or New York or whatever, in a way that, you think is going to create trust. And in the process, you actually alienate the person you're talking to.
Well, there's another rule in the book called avoid polarizing topics. So that encapsulates of what you said to stay away from. So avoid those. This one really is, again, based on the underlying science that, when you tastefully and appropriately use humor in a conversation, that something happens to the people. They become more bonded. It really reflects, if you're laughing about the same things, if you enjoy the joy of humor, basically, then you're essentially conveying that you have kind of a shared worldview on things. Now, this is something that needs to be practiced. And frankly, in the book, after each rule, there are 5 questions that are exercises that you can start implementing the thought process and start practicing these rules right away. So you have to practice this one. Personally, I am not a comedian. Some people have accused me of being a sit-down comedian because I'm usually telling jokes when I'm sitting down. My stand-up work is not something that you're going to pay for, believe me. But the point is, I'm more situational. I'll be in a conversation, I'll be in a room, and I'm certainly not the funniest guy around. I might be the funniest looking guy. I'm not the funniest guy around. And for me, it's really being intensely aware, again, being mindful of what is going on. And it could be something kind of ridiculous that's kind of funny. And you just pick up on it. There's no example. You just have to pick up on things and practice.
Just the little aside. It's like, well, here we go again.
Exactly. I'll give you an example. We did a world in-store launch at Barnes & Noble in Oak Brook, Illinois on May 4th. We just came out with the book a few months ago. And we had over 100 people sold out all the books. We got a lot of support from Barnes & Noble and other bookstore chains as well. But the point is, my barber happened to be in the first row. And he actually is kind of a comedian type of guy. We have a great colloquy, and we joke around a lot when I go get my hair done. As you can see, he doesn't have a hard job cutting my hair. But the point is, I really enjoy hanging out with him, and he was in the first row. So I started just, jabbing back and forth a little bit with him, and people were laughing. Everybody was having a good time. And, those are the little things, because I noticed he was in the first row. Inject a little humor into the presentation, and people actually really had a lot of fun. So there are a lot of examples, but there's underlying science that really helps you share a perspective that you have the same worldview, and that brings people together.
I'm going to skip forward here to rule number, where is it? Number 12. Be confident, be compelling. So one person that I've been watching recently, just in the media, is Deion Sanders, who obviously was a star athlete in the NFL, I think for the 49ers and the Cowboys, and has recently been sort of elevated to Division I coaching headline status in Colorado. And he does a great job talking about confidence and sort of the expectation that because you are confident, because you're confident, you expect to do well. That your expectations of yourself are the most important expectations. Anyway, rhetorically, he's very effective about confidence and the distinction between confidence and cockiness or arrogance or condescension. And I'm interested in how you advise people to project confidence, your confidence in your ideas for this book, for instance, relative to something that is more offensive because it comes off as cockiness.
It's one of my favorite rules. Remember, the whole idea is building this deep emotional connection for the long term. And what science shows is that when you are confident in whatever you're talking about, it's going to convey the perception of competence, and the other person is going to trust you just a little bit more, if not a lot more. And the science also shows that, frankly, being slightly overconfident is actually more effective, not cocky.
Which goes to Deion Sanders, by the way, because he's certainly on the edge of overconfidence, but in an endearing way. I mean, if anybody could potentially come off as cocky and obnoxious, it's that guy. But I find that he actually does a great job of coming off as sort of overconfident, but still endearing.
In science really uses the phrase slightly overconfident. So that's probably what he is doing unintentionally, obviously, just part of his natural style. And people tend to really trust that. And again, it's about the buy. So if you are kind of wishy-washy, let's say you're out pitching business, all right, you want a new client, and you are not confident. You're like, yeah, I think we can do this, and we're going to try really hard. If you say, we got this, we've done this a million times, we have clients just like you, and we've had our clients for a long time, so they must like what we're doing. And frankly, here's the slightly overconfident. I really don't know of any other firm that has our business model. We're really proud of that. So the bottom line is, when you are confident, you're compelling to people, and they're going to be much more trusting. And in the business context, they're going to be much more likely to do business with you.
Why is emotional connection? Because I'm not gonna go more into this list, because I'll encourage people to read Hit It Off. Why is emotional connection more important than transactional value?
Well, emotional connection ties back to the fact that it is one of our most basic human needs. We all want to be connected to other people. We're not talking material things, houses, cars, things like that. It's a fundamental human need. It really relates back to our survival instinct. We want to survive. We need other people to survive. And so when you tap into that basic human need and you provide that level of connection in a great way for someone, it's really going to go a long way. And I say exponentially, it's going to maximize the likelihood of you achieving your goal in the relationship. Guess what? By doing that, you're going to help the other person achieve the goal in the relationship that they want. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. We don't want a world of makers. We don't want a world of just takers. We need both people coming together and being synergistic. And the book is really intended, if you follow the rules, we can be more synergistic with each other and tap into that basic human need of human connection.
Joe Bricado is the name of our guest. The book is called Hit It Off. You're watching Bootstrapping. I'm Dylan Ratigan. More Tasty Live coming up right after this. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.